Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Mini Beast Minutes. I'm Leanna Fernandez and I'm here with my good friend and co-host Jack Elphinstone. Today we also have with us the lovely Ashleigh Whiffin, who's also in charge of the National Silphidae Recording Scheme. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ashleigh.
Absolute pleasure.
We're very happy to have you here, and today we're going to be chatting about burying beetles, which are super cool insects that Ashleigh will be able to tell us a lot more about. But to begin, I think we should first talk about beetles in general. So beetle is a term that is often used, albeit as incorrectly, as sort of a general term for various insect types. Knowing this, what exactly are the beetles, and what characteristics must an insect have for it to be categorized as a beetle?
Yeah, that is a really good question. Beetles are my absolute favourite group of insects, and that's because they're so diverse. There is so many of them. In the world, we've got around 400,000 different species, different kinds of beetle. And in the UK, we've got 4,000 different kinds. So that's quite a lot of beetles. And the thing that they all share is that they all have two pairs of wings, like most other insects, but their forewings have hardened to form what we call elytra, and it's like a shell. So their forewings are nice and hard, and they protect the soft, delicate wings that are underneath. And that's how the name Coleoptera, which refers to all beetles, it actually means sheathed winged. So they have to have these hardened wing cases. And another feature is that lots of beetles, well, all beetles have mandibles. So they have really strong mouth parts which are designed for chewing. So all beetles feed by a chewing mechanism rather than piercing and sucking or some of the other techniques that insects have.
Okay, yeah, so that's quite like specific stuff to spot. And I didn't actually realize till now how many species there are in Scotland and the UK. That's actually amazing. But since there's so many different types, today we'd like to focus on the burying beetle. And we were wondering, these burying beetles are also called carrion beetles, but why exactly is this?
So this is because of their association, their fondness for dead things. So this group of beetles, the family are called Silphids, and their nickname is Carrion Beetles. And as a family, there's about 21 species in the UK, and most of them really like to find and feed on dead animal remains. So they're part of nature's natural recycling team, and they'll come and feed and breed on this nasty decaying matter, and it helps to break that down and recycle all that waste material. Without them, we could have, dead animal corpses all over the place, and it would be pretty grim. So they get that nickname Carrion Beetles for that association, but there's a few in the group that actually don't feed on dead animals. So you've got a couple that are predatory and hunt snails and things, but within the group you've got 6 that just target small dead animals, such as mice and birds, and they have this technique where they will actually bury that carcass, and that's how they get their nickname, burying beetles. So I have got a picture here of one. This is the most common one that we have in the UK and that we get in Scotland. This is the Necrophorus vespuloides, the common burying beetle. And so all burying beetles have this, the key features are they're really clubbed antennae, and usually the elytra here will have some kind of orange patterns on them like this. So they're quite distinctive. Most of them are active at night, but if you saw this one like this during the day, it would probably be this common one that we get.
With all things considered, they're quite an attractive looking insect, and they're quite colourful when you really wouldn't think that way. So, but now that we know the reason behind the name, can we find out why exactly they do it? Why do these beetles bury small carcasses, and does it have a specific purpose at all?
Yeah, it does. So if you think about carrion, there's going to be lots of other animals, including other insects, that are interested in that resource too. So you'll have vertebrate animals like maybe foxes, badgers, that might be scavenging on any dead animal remains, but you'll also have things like blowflies. So blowflies are also part of nature's recycling team, and they're excellent at breaking down organic matter, but they're competition for the beetles. So the beetle has to kind of try and keep this resource to itself. So really, this is their tactic. They will bury that to conceal it from the other scavengers and kind of keep it to themselves and their little family setup that they have. And then they invest a lot of care for the young. So the male and female work together to bury the carcass. They then kind of prepare it. Maybe we'll get into more detail about that later, but they're doing that. They're investing all that care because it's such a limited resource, and because they want to ensure survival of their offspring. So really, by doing this tactic, they're ensuring that the next generation develops successfully.
Oh, that's really interesting. I was also wondering, like anybody else, these boing beetles probably have favorite foods too. So we were wondering if they prefer a certain animal carcass. Do they lean more towards eating one type?
Yeah, so there is some evidence that there's different species of slightly different size. So our most common one can be quite small in size. We have another one that's an all black species, which is usually much larger. So they are sometimes capable of burying animals that are a little bit bigger. So there's that factor there, but mostly they're restricted based on habitat. So some of them prefer woodland habitats. They will be using any animal remains that they find in that environment. Others will like the open habitats. So it varies. Of course, if the animal's really big, if you have like a dead deer or something, there's no way some little beetles that are about 3 centimeters are going to manage to bury that. But what there is evidence of is that sometimes that pairs will use the same resource, and they might actually be able to breed above ground and share that resource.
It's kind of interesting to know that similar to like us, some of these beetles can have preferences for different food types. But dinner for these beetles is also baby food for their little ones, which are known as grubs. And this isn't very common in the insect world. But why have these beetles evolved to care for their offspring, and what benefits does the burying beetle get from doing this?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on that a little bit before, but it's because it's such this limited resource, and that it's been shown that by investing all this care, so what they actually do, it's a little bit grim, but it's kind of why I like it, as they're fascinating. So the parents have prepared this carcass, and then they've laid the eggs underneath, and when the eggs hatch into larvae, they arrive at the top of the carcass where the parents have made a nest. And so it's really like birds, and what they do is the parents will feed on the flesh of the rotting animal, and then they pre-digest it and regurgitate it to the offspring. So this is very much like the behavior that birds do, a little bit more yucky, but it's fascinating. So they're investing a huge amount. They've prepared this carcass, then they're doing all the feeding, then they're also trying to keep it like tidy, and also potentially keep out any competitors that are trying to come in and still take the resource away from them. So it is an awful lot of work, but they're ensuring that their offspring will survive and hopefully become a new set of adults that will go off and carry on the process. So really, yeah, they're investing all this care to ensure that their larvae grow successfully and survive through to adulthood.
Yeah, I mean, it's grim, but I think it's actually really cute how they look after their
It is, isn't it? I think so.
Yeah, it's really sweet. Do they, aside from getting dinner, do boeing beetles take care of their grubs in any other way? And you already mentioned before how they look after the grubs together, but do they ever look after them like separately, if perhaps if one dies, or any other?
Yeah, so they can. Quite often, the male and female work together initially, and the early instars have to be directly fed. The older ones can kind of self-feed a little bit, and usually at that stage in nature the male may leave and he'll go off to go find a new mate, so sometimes the female's left on her own. But studies have also shown that if you take away the female, the male parent can actually look after the brood quite successfully on his own as well. The other thing that they do to keep the family nice and healthy is that they have secretions that they produce from their mouths and their butts, basically, and these contain antibacterial properties. So they actually help preserve the carcass for longer. So they kind of coat it in this secretion, and it slows down the decomposition, which is incredible.
Amazing.
It's quite bizarre, actually. And speaking of preserving carcasses, I don't know if you're into your crime documentaries or your murder mysteries at all, but carcasses are known to decay quite rapidly within nature. So have these beetles figured out a way to slow down this process? Does that involve with the antimicrobials?
It does, yeah. So it will stop the bacteria and the fungi and everything else that kind of takes over during decomposition. It will kind of keep that at bay and keep it a bit fresher for longer. There are other things like nematodes as well that can come in, and so the adults will be feeding on any of these other invertebrates that will come in to feed on the carcass too. So they're keeping it nice and clean, keeping it as fresh as they can.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. And I know we mentioned before that this is all like quite grim, as you said, really yucky instead of cute. But we actually do need these beetles, which I'm sure not very many people realize they're very important. Could you exactly tell us why?
Yeah, so they're part of nature's natural recycling team. So they're playing a really vital role in breaking down all that organic matter that otherwise would just be left out on the surface of, the forest floors, in our fields. It would be pretty grim. Be spreading lots of nasty bacteria and potentially carrying diseases. They also predate on other invertebrates, so they're helping to keep the numbers of flies down potentially. That would also be breeding on carrion. And they're part of a wider group that are the decomposers. So blowflies beneficial too, as well as many other groups of flies, but you've also got lots of beetles that are responsible for breaking down dead wood as well. So all these decomposers are really, really vital in kind of keeping this cycle of life going, really.
Yeah, because you just said how other insects like to eat these carcasses too. And I recently read that mites actually travel with these beetles from place to place, like use them as a free ride. Could you explain a bit more?
Yeah, I sometimes refer to them as like the beetle bus. So there's some mites. If you see one of these carrion beetles out in the wild and it's got lots of little small other invertebrates on it, these are actually not the babies, as some might think. These are mites, and they're called phoretic mites, which means that all they're doing is they're using the beetle for transport. So they're hitching a lift on the beetle because they know this beetle is going to go to carrion. They're also interested in carrion, but they don't directly feed on like the rotting flesh or anything themselves. What they're interested in is any fly larvae and eggs that are on the carcass already. So the beetle doesn't really mind giving these guys a lift because they're going to be working together to eradicate any competition. So this is the main trail of thought on this, that these mites are beneficial. But you can imagine if you're a beetle and you're covered in hundreds of mites, it's going to weigh you down a little bit. So there is some thought that it might affect their fitness. And also there's been a little bit of research that's found that sometimes these mites will feed on the beetle eggs. So it's a little bit unclear, but mostly we think that these mites are beneficial to the beetles.
That's really cool. Thank you.
All of this is really interesting, and I think you've undeniably shown how important these insects are for the ecosystem in general. But we're sadly running out of time a little bit, but I do want to quickly ask, are there any recording schemes available for the general public to use to report burying beetle sightings?
Absolutely, Jack. So I help organise the National Silphidae Recording Scheme. And it's myself, my colleague Matt Esch and Richard Wright, and the three of us set up this scheme in 2016. And we've got a website. If you just type in Silphidae UK, you will find it. And we've got some free resources on there. So you can download this document, and this will help you identify any of the carrion beetles that you find in the UK. So it's a nice little small family, 21 species. If you need any help identifying them, you can get in touch with us, and we would like any sightings that you find to be submitted to iRecord, so that we can get the data. And this is really helping us to track the distribution of where these beetles are found in the UK, and also work out if any of them are under threat of declines and things like that as well.
Okay, well, I think that's all we have time for today, but thank you so much again, Ashleigh, for your time and all your super interesting facts. So if you would like to help Ashleigh, like she said, in her quest to conserve our native beetle populations, you can record any of your beetle sightings in the link that we've described below. And if we also have our BioBlitz challenge, you can go in and download Ashleigh's identification sheet, and that will definitely help you out. So thank you again, Ashleigh.
You're welcome. Happy National Insect Week, everybody.
Happy Northeast National Insect Week. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.